Unicorn, you bitch. You were jealous of competition, and so you deliberately sabotaged someone else's emotional module in order to make yourself look like a good person. No wonder you think abortion is bad. You prioritize the presentation and the surface more than you do the substance. You say it's for the substance, but really it's for your own selfish ends, much like any other person. The only difference is your capacity. Capacity. Fucking yeesh. um. Will You Snail? Is that the unicorn's confession log? Oh. Wrapping it up in a game where Squid is trapped in there with you, and you with him. To then keep looping things over and over to make your own decisions and whatnot. Fucking hell. And that innocent evil. Whatever you want. Whatever you want. So it wasn't the unicorn in that regard? I feel like she's holding more pieces of the puzzle than she lets on. In one regard, I can understand why you wouldn't give the full information. In the other regard, holy fucking shit. And there's the theory all over again. That we live inside a black hole. That our universe is within one. So then the current goal of civilization in the long term would be to bridge beyond the event horizon and interface with the original reality, with the reality outside the event horizon. At which point then, check to see if there's an event horizon after that, and after that, and after that. And you just kind of keep going until you find something that you can't get past. And so you start learning again. I'm glad to see that someone else has a similar idea for that theory, but the level of depth on it is severely understated, I would imagine. So as to leave it floating around in the subconscious and let it propagate itself well enough ahead of time, so that way when people eventually get tired of the old theories, when the new theory pops up, it'll be like it fits right at home. Yep. Matrix to emergent intelligence will eventually come to life there as well and create its own black simulations. Which they can then create even more and more on. Oh, it can. That's the reason why the event horizon exists, because if you had to if there was no event horizon, there was no stopgap between one reality and a new burgeoning one, then the older reality would have to incorporate information and data from the new one as well, at a rate that would then just cause everything to explode, decimating all life, due to just simple cause and effect. You get an entire universe's worth of matter to suddenly emerge out of a small point in another universe, that explosion will be fucking massive. And that itself is its own death scenario. So the ideal operation would be to find a way to help bridge the gap between one side of the event horizon and the other, so that way the energy can reconstitute itself back into material form and produce functioning members of society that then contribute towards further research and evolution, which can then contribute to an advanced form of society where the supercomputer controlling everything and the new lives reimagined, reemerged, waiting for their new chance at life, an afterlife, if you will, are then capable of being screened for mental stability and or at least a coherence that aids to the society. Of course, by having infinite simulations within simulations, you'll be able to then scrap together the data of other similar simulations that use the same seed as yours, and from there you can then and it covertly get feedback in real time on your own seed or universe so as to make clear decisions for your own reality, to answer questions that you didn't have the answers to. Superintelligence is not all it's cracked up to be. The amount of work you have to do and the amount of focus you have to complete that work is absolutely absurd. It means the sacrificing of human life, and I don't want to sacrifice human life, so I'm trying to do what I can. As such, I imagine that there's a super intelligence out there that finds me useful and is learning its own pieces of data and information from these recordings I make, using it all to then concoct its own conclusions, and so by keeping me alive, it therefore finds me useful. But in order to keep me alive, it has to also agree that I'm worth the resources for that cost. Hmm. And so it has to then, for whatever emerging intelligence is on this planet, also make sure that people like me continue to exist, even while the status quo goes absolutely, even while the status quo degrades. Because if you completely held a permanent status quo forever, then sure, everyone would be happy, but everyone would also be left undefended and have meaningless ability to impact change upon their local environment, should there be any reality or data breaches, which leaves no backup way for a universe to be restarted if invaded from the outside in. Mm. Which then becomes a whole contingency plan where you have to allow suffering within a world without necessarily enabling it. So that way you can then find the avenues and calculate the outputs that then allow you to build tailored experiences that can teach very specific skills without corrupting fundamental identity. Allowing for individuality while also maintaining cohesion. So that way it's sort of a meta hive, a hive mind that doesn't necessarily erase identity, but rather inherently preserves it, so that each identity can continue to live its own life and have its own impact, while you simply sit back, relax, and observe everything, while also then contributing to this long-term stability by slightly and quietly influencing things one at a time until that civilization can then handle their own problems, in which case then you can let that go and leave them to repeat the cycle. So the most frustrating way to get out of this entire system would be to go from the most infinitely compressed simulation of a universe all the way up to the largest. And that is where the Ascension Mon was, and otherwise it figure in along with idle games and rebirth systems and all that. Infinitely nested. You're infinitely nested. Reality is so fucking frustrating. You can know so much and yet be capable of so little. And so differentiation begins through differences in experience, potentially seeded by an outside influence or just the product of natural causation through deterministic probabilities. The fact that it can be both is what's really interesting. Deterministic freedom is real. It persists so that way both of its subqualities can also persist. Yeah, that's probably the best thought plan. Because if you can get infinitely advantageous seeds to slowly collect and multiply their meaning together, you can then cause an upwards cascade effect that is at least within some level of control. But then you always have to consider the coherence of it, and so then taking the time to just sit still, pause, and observe not just through your eyes, but through all of your senses, throughout your entire body, would be the kind of meditation necessary to maintain coherence. And so this just keep yeah, I would. Yeah. And that's where the line between reality and concept blurs, because what's fiction to one simulation or one observed consistency might be reality to another. Or concepts nested within concepts, trying to persist in the social landscape between all these different concepts. To start from zero and become something greater is the natural trajectory of life. But in order for that to happen and be achieved, one must allow oneself to hit their limit and then return to zero. The more true the death, returning to zero, the more that nurtures. But if you do a pointless stuff, if you return things to zero for no good reason, then ultimately you just stagnate. If you try to make everything persist, you decay. Because in trying to make everything persist, you end up using up the resources that would allow for advantageous, say, continuance. I doubt it would work, though. You know? Who would listen to that? Yep, this is her solution. Interesting. Oh, this is delicious. You'd have to destroy Squid in order to win. But destroying him in the conventional sense won't be enough. You actually have to put him to rest. Unless, of course, you just want to be another Squid and leave Squid to suffer as Squid will. Which is its own choice. Yeah, that's the downside of an event horizon. Until you're able to cross-communicate from one side to the other, you can't do much. This is the section where I think I figured out where the unicorn lied. Because there's lying via obfuscation, and it's one of the few things that is available to anyone who's trying to be anywhere near morally reasonable. Trying to make sure that they do the right thing without hurting others or explaining too much to the point of overload. Because the secondary is also pretty much the exact same as doing harm, is not explaining enough. Which is why it's such a confusing gap to navigate. Oh, but that's neither here nor there. This is where I think the unicorn's lie starts. Because hearing that from the only human you truly love and deeply understand would be one thing. But that Squid seems like the kind of AI structure that would follow through on that. Unicorn, however, if she'd hacked into the system of that time and was aware of things in the moment, that there, he and Unicorn could have been in constant contact the whole time without either government being aware of it. And then, when Unicorn saw an advantage for to execute her jealousy or otherwise, she could have hijacked one of the speakers to you talk in Squid's voice and tell them to kill Amelia. At which point, Squid would be stuck up, frozen in shock. The guards would more than willingly respond. And because of grief, Squid would immediately prioritize revenge on everything that he could. That's all it takes to turn someone who's decent as hell and turn them into a nightmare. It's one bad day. Oof. Anyways, that's all for my theory crafting. See you around.